here in a couple of minutes. Let's give a few more people the opportunity to get in. So everyone just hold tight. Looks like we still have a few more people trickling in. Let's give them 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and start. All right, let's go ahead and begin. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Allbridge. I'm Brady Lever. It's my pleasure to be part of the team that's presenting this webinar to you this morning. Before we continue, just a couple of housekeeping items. We'd like to invite your active participation throughout the session. Right now, everyone's on mute, and we'll keep everyone on mute throughout the session. However, as questions come up, please present or send them to the questions box that you'll see in the dashboard. And we'll be watching that throughout the session. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. Throughout the duration of each seminar, we'll be recording this session. It'll be available to you guys within the next 48 hours or so on sourcingleadership.com. Also, keep an eye out in your inboxes for an email. You should be getting that tomorrow. That'll have a link to the recording as well. We're lucky enough to have Dan Bryan, one of our managing directors here at Allbridge, with us today, as well as Louis Pellegrino. And at this time, I'll turn the time over to them. Dan, have we got you on mute? Louis, are you there?
I am here, yeah.
Would you mind introducing yourself?
I'd be
we're having
happy
some audio
to.
problems with Dan.
No worries. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us this morning. By way of introduction, my name is Louis Pellegrino, and I'm a relatively new member of the Allbridge team, joining it back last year. And that came after a nearly 20-year run with the Microsoft Corporation, where I spent a considerable amount of time both in the consulting services organization as well as with the worldwide licensing and pricing group, responsible really for the volume licensing agreements and how those agreements ultimately were customized. And have a long history prior to that. I mean, I can only say that my range of interfaces, human interfaces, goes from a deck writer to an Apple Watch, and for connectivity, from a 300 baud acoustic coupler to ubiquitous Wi-Fi. So that's who I am in a nutshell. I will be presenting the content for today's discussion. Dan Bryan is our managing director for the Allbridge Information Technology Asset Management service line. Dan, like myself, is a long-term veteran, has been in the years, better than 30 years, with mostly the larger companies, whether it's HP, Manugistics, and others. But he brings a great deal of experience and expertise in the areas that are critical and core to our IT asset management service line. Okay. Real quickly, this is just a quick sort of high-level description of who the Allbridge organization is. Many of you may have already have relationships with us through previous engagements, but at the top level, Allbridge is an organization that's been around for better than 14 years. Our core focus has been on in the area of IT outsourcing, IT network management, and advisory. We have extended our practice over the years to include the service line that I am focused with, which is IT asset management. We really do have more of a focus on helping customers figure out how to maximize their spend through a combination of aggressive negotiating, but also contract transformation. We're not a general management consulting company, but we are an independent offering that deals with the services that we provide. We represent no other manufacturer or publisher. We are completely independent of that. Things that make us, I think, unique in our particular industry is the embeddedness in which our relationships have been able to be established and maintained. We actually have what's called basically a no divorce track record, indicating that in every instance where we have engaged, customers have been largely to mostly satisfied with the results, and we've never had the opportunity to deal anything with that. We do keep a very extensive database with better than 300,000 data points inclusive in it, which helps us track, if you will, the most important price points and differentiators between services, products that are available in the marketplace. The engagements that we cover today typically touch and address upwards of $5 billion in annual market spend. And as a company, we were about 250. We're slightly larger now in the wake of a recent acquisition that we did in the UK with another IT management company called Source. So that's just a quick thumbnail of who the Allbridge organization is and who today's presenters are. So as it relates to our agenda for today, we've already discussed a little bit about who Allbridge is. What we're going to do with the rest of this conversation is, for many of you who are, obviously Microsoft licensee veterans, I'm sure that none of you on the call are new to Microsoft. You may have had, one or more enterprise agreement experiences with Microsoft, maybe even more. But it helps for purposes of understanding how the industry is changing and how Microsoft is a component within this industry change, to understand, again, how these volume licensing agreements work, what their design methods are, what some of the implications are of how those agreements work and how they create some exposure around the concept of software audits, what you can and should be thinking about in the area of proactivity to kind of help you not only with Microsoft, but with all of the other publishers whose products you use. I think what we're going to talk about today may be sort of stressed in the Microsoft context, but it has broad application to the relationships you have with not only Microsoft, but with every other major software publisher whose products you license. We'll be talking a little bit about some of the solutions at a very high level. If you don't already have a solution in place, these are areas that you may want to spend a little bit more time digging into. And then we'll, of course, we'll punctuate with the benefits that accrue to you once you have been able to get your arms around some more systemic and automated asset management in which you can help with respect to decision making and overall governance. So that's that's the path we'll follow for today. By way of just sort of refreshing everybody's memory with respect to how does Microsoft actually take its IP and transfer a license to you as an enterprise user. Well, long gone are the days when software used to be delivered in prepackaged boxes on pallets that landed on your loading dock. The volume licensing model has been around for better than 15 years. And it does give customers the ability to conveniently download and install software with what's called a reusable installation key. And if you can remember back to the days when you actually bought discs and DVDs and you installed software, part of that installation process required the input of a specific installation key, which was very specific to that one instance. Volume licensing gives you a break from not having to worry about multiple instances of an installation key. A particular product simply has with it one installation key that covers as many times as that product is going to be installed, which separates it from the way many other assets are actually covered. I mean, if you look at a hardware asset, and let's just take a notebook as an example, typically when an enterprise purchases a notebook, it does go through basically an inventory process and ultimately gets an inventory asset tag, which differentiates that notebook from any other notebook that's currently in circulation. The result of having a common installation key for Microsoft software is that there are instances where installations that go on largely unnoticed and consequently uninventoried. And when you think about the implications of that, I mean, just a few licenses, whether it's Microsoft Office or Microsoft Project or Visio, the combination of those licenses alone typically exceeds the value of the notebook. And if you're looking at server-based software, whether it's Windows Server, SQL Server, System Center, by the time you install one or more licenses on a hardware appliance, typically the cost to the company for that software is greater than the cost of the servers. But because software isn't physical things, software doesn't necessarily lend itself to the same level of asset management scrutiny that we otherwise impart on our hardware assets. So that's just kind of more of a positioning point than anything else, just to make sure that we understand that typically most organizations treat hardware and software asset management differently. When it comes to Microsoft's volume licensing, I mean, the common installation key does create the opportunity for many customers to simply deploy the product at will without really worrying about too much. And there's really very little by way of a mechanism to track those installations and understand what order placement obligations are required for you to fulfill in order to remain compliant. Now, the approach is a good approach from Microsoft. This is really about giving you the convenience and simplicity of being able to use the software that Microsoft makes available. And to that end, it works very well. But when it comes time to start looking exactly at the difference between what you're entitled to run and what you actually have deployed, most customers, I would say 99% of customers, will find ultimately that they have more deployed instances of certain products than they have entitlements for. There are cases when it flips the other way, that a customer may have an inventory of entitlements, but yet the deployments don't necessarily show that they've actually consumed it all. But that's more the exception than it is a rule. And this, of course, puts clients in a difficult spot when they have to start their negotiating with Microsoft, who, once they understand that there's an imbalance between deployments and entitlements, the remediation efforts really begin to sort of come front and center. So, as someone who worked for Microsoft for many years, there was a time when the mere discussion of auditing a customer was taboo. Microsoft was very fearful of the public relations implications that went along with an audit. There was a worry that that sort of behavior would seem heavy-handed. And so for many years, audits were very, very exceptional and only manifested in the most extreme cases where it was just known that there was something wickedly wrong going on with a particular customer's use of Microsoft's IP. But today, the market is different, and Microsoft is taking a different look at software audits. And like most of its other publisher peers, that they have really begun to not only look at audits as an exception, but more as a mainstream process that they're actually embedded in their sales motion, to the degree that Microsoft field sellers are actually assigned to revenue targets that explicitly tie them to being able to recover remediation dollars, spoken in other words, compliance dollars, from customers who are high volume customers. And so it begins. There is now a very embedded process that Microsoft executes across its entire customer segments. And Microsoft, for the most part, has 3 segments. It has customers like yourselves who they consider enterprise customers. It also has a segment, like most other companies market to, the small and medium business. But every customer is now included in a process flow which they will ultimately be contacted with respect to doing either a passive or a very specific audit in order to show proof of entitlement for the particular products that they're currently running. And the process is, they can begin with something as benign as simply a self-inventory, where Microsoft will send you a document and you are supposed to complete that document in a specific amount of time, turn it back in, and nothing may ever result from that. But again, there's nothing that precludes Microsoft from escalating the request from just simply being a voluntary request to a compulsory request. When this happens, and when Microsoft discovers that there are licenses that are deployed that are not yet have underlying entitlements associated with them, this then shifts the burden to you all to show and prove why these licenses are not in service. A lot of customers will, make representations that these are dev and test licenses, or these are licenses that were never properly swept off of a machine that was taken out of service. And while those all may be absolutely points of truth, you're going to have to now produce evidence to support your position. Otherwise, Microsoft will take the position that these are production licenses. Ultimately, Microsoft does wind up collecting some form of remediation revenue. Typically, it's a significant amount of revenue because most customers don't necessarily have all of the history to support some of their claims that why a particular instance of software is not a production piece of software. So one way or the other, Microsoft is going to find a way to get something out of this event at your expense. Moreover, if this event unfolds and if Microsoft is able to collect some remediation revenue, and in the course of that audit or that SAM engagement really learns that you don't have an asset management solution or a license management solution in place, it does set up the opportunity for them to kind of put a tickler for themselves that maybe in 2 to 3 years come back and take another bite of the apple. So now what I've just told you is not simply an exception handling protocol anymore. This is systemic. This is mainstream Microsoft business flow, is to now integrate remediation and compliance dollars into their overall revenue mix. So this leaves us with this discussion that, all right, so I'm a potential target to Microsoft. What is it that I can do? How can I protect myself? Or at least make myself a whole lot more ready to deal with the fact that an audit is coming my way. So this involves having a little bit more of a proactive strategy in order to respond to the invitations that Microsoft will ultimately send you, if they haven't already, to participate in either a SAM engagement or, even worse, a full-scale audit. You have the opportunity to kind of turn this scenario around by making it very clear to Microsoft that you're not managing your licenses and your entitlements and your deployments in a reactive way, that you have a very robust oversight of what's going on in each of those arenas. To be able to sort of take in combination with the actual licenses, the agreements that are used to transact those licenses, the inventory that will actually depict where these licenses are running, and the corresponding purchase history. Now, these are all 3 parts that have to come together in order to form the basis of a software asset management solution. There are a lot of systems out there that can do discovery, that can find instances of software that's installed, but they sometimes fall short of having the full feature set to include things like, how do I understand what agreement these licenses were purchased under? How do I integrate the entitlement history that my publisher, in this case Microsoft, has, so that I can do more automated reconciliation myself versus having to wait for a third party to come in? Equally important are, once you have established a baseline for your SAM, the opportunity to use some of these systems to do better workflow automation and to impart better controls if we go back to some of the points we made in the earlier slide about the simplicity of being able to simply deploy software because of the common installation key, no one is suggesting that we change the convenience, but maybe we do a better job of at least overseeing and watching and auditing and making sure that we journal such activities when they happen so that we don't have to find these instances by way of exception. And this is all in part to make sure that we tried as much as possible to oversee our installations such that none of them take place in a vacuum. That oversight also leads us to the opportunity to be able to start looking at the status of a license. Is a license that's out there deployed, is it actually assigned, or is it sitting idle? Is that license belong to a device? Does that license belong to a user? Is that user still with the organization, or has that user left? This all sets up the interesting and very powerful ability to look at license inventory and to be able to do a lot more repurposing of unused or underutilized assets versus either repurchasing or truing them up if you're operating under an enterprise agreement. All of those points collectively create a very compelling presentation back to Microsoft that makes it clear that Microsoft has no leverage to simply arbitrarily squeeze revenue from you because you don't have a method or a system to deal with your product deployments. You really are not dealing any longer with mismanaged product deployments, but very specifically well-managed product deployments. That fact alone will change the tone and tenor of your future licensing negotiations, because it is this fact that customers sometimes do not place enough emphasis on software asset management that does shift the leverage to Microsoft when it comes time to negotiate their agreements. By having a more complete and comprehensive view of how you're going to deal with your product licenses, deployments, the entitlements that Microsoft has available, does give you a far more leveraged position in negotiations and allows you to lead that negotiation instead of to follow it. What we do with customers in this particular area is if you don't have a software asset management solution, or maybe you have something that you might think is a solution, as I mentioned, there are products out there that do a reasonably good job of discovery. Even the Microsoft System Center product can do a good job of collecting information about the hardware, about the licenses that are associated with that hardware, so that at least you can get an idea of what's running. But they kind of end there. And if you look at what we were trying to mention, there are several factors or attributes that we really want to help people understand and put into their decision-making criteria if and when they begin the process of evaluating software asset management solutions. There are some very obvious attributes. The first attribute is visibility. How robust is this product? What can it discover on my network? Can it discover all publishers? Can it discover instances running on not only PC form factors, but maybe the newer form factors? So being able to understand how wide a net the solution can cast in order to know what devices it can include in its inventory process. Once the inventory is done, what other identifying attributes can it provide me? Can it help me with understanding the metadata that software title is basically coded by? Remember, a lot of publishers, Microsoft chief among them, produce products with the same title but with different editions. There are standard editions, there are professional editions, there are enterprise editions of different products. Being able to make sure that not only did I discover a particular instance of a software, but can I also understand all the metadata that went along with that particular title, because that may become important later on when I'm doing optimization. I need to know if some of the higher end editions of a particular product are in place where the use cases actually justify it, or am I paying a premium for a product where there's no underlying use case? Then when you think about the decision-making criteria, so now you've found items, you've got clarity around what those items are. Can it help you now stack rank what it's found and give you some sense of where are the critical issues, what are the issues that require my immediate and urgent attention, so that I can get myself out from any possible compliance circumstance. So this again is, this is where you see products like System Center and other network discovery tools begin to kind of fall off. They're not designed to give you this added intelligence with respect to how do I process the data. when it comes to efficiency, one of the things that we want to be able to do with the information that comes to us is, how does it help me understand my use cases? How does it help me understand where I have competing products that may be providing overlapping services? Does it give me the added insight to know how to be more agile in the planning for how to purchase moving forward? Can I gather details and perspective from this information that, again, will help me reshape some of my assumptions that have been used to do my bill of materials in the past? Remember, one of the things that Microsoft and many software sellers are very effective at is upselling particular licenses that have higher level of additions and selling them into customer spaces. They'll make a lot of representations about the value these products can deliver, and all too often what typically happens is, when they are successful in getting these higher edition products landed in your environment based on the promise that it's going to be able to do something that the lesser edition couldn't do, very rarely do customers ever have the opportunity to exercise whatever those features are that were contained in the higher edition, such that they really got the business value from it that Microsoft or any other publisher whose products come in multiple editions was indicating that you could otherwise get. So there's that ability to sort of be able to look at exactly how do I use the product and whether or not I am over purchasing for a particular use case. And the last item is sort of the continuing services improvement. One of the things that you'll want to be able to do is, we talked about workflow and the ability to use a system to avoid, if you will, the unintended consequences of deployments that take place in a vacuum. When you look at some of the workflow and the automation that's available in these upper-end systems, you get the advantage of seeing exactly how you can put better controls on how software is requested, who is given sort of the opportunity to approve and disapprove, how that particular software installation then is logged, tracked, and monitored from here forward, specifically as to whether or not it remains an assigned license or it becomes an unassigned license that can be put back into inventory, as well as this is your major tool to deal with the invitation for an audit. So the whole area of governance, when you can have a solution that provides all of the features and all of the attributes that we've just described, you really have got complete governance around your software asset estate. When we look at the marketplace, we also kind of help understand the various players whose products are out there who comply with the attributes that we just discussed in the previous slide. So companies like Flexera, Aspera, Snow, Xasset, ServiceNow, we've reviewed all of these solutions, and all of these solutions provide the upper-end functionalities that we've discussed. It's interesting that when looking at the combination of these solutions and the publishers whose products you actually run, there may be instances where some products really need to take advantage of the full spectrum of features and others do not. So these are some of the areas that we would potentially come and work with you on to understand exactly how much or how little of a particular solution makes sense for purposes of implementation, so that you're not simply overextending the tool and putting, using a nuclear fly swatter on some instances where the problem just doesn't warrant the solution that you're putting in place. These solutions typically come in a variety of different configurations. Increasingly, a lot of the companies are moving their services, are moving their solution to a service. So you'll see a lot of folks who actually make their solution available as a hosted service subscription. Others have their products installed, but in many cases, even the folks whose products have been legacy installed products are making a software subscription option available as well. You need to make sure that they all have various license managers, so they can do a very good job of doing the inventory and the metadata recovery from the licenses. They have a great agreement manager, so based on whether you're working with an enterprise agreement or an ad hoc purchase agreement, where these licenses came from. As people deploy licenses in the future, being able to understand what agreement those licenses will actually transact under. They all do a great job of doing hardware discovery. So when we talk about these tools, we've been talking about in the context of software, but of course you really can't do the software discovery without doing the underlying hardware discovery. And so many customers benefit from being able to have this very broad view of the total hardware-software estate. Some of these products do a better job than others in making sure that the virtual instances, all of the servers that are not physical servers that are running in either ESX or Hyper-V or any of the other hypervisors, being able to understand where they are, how they are configured, whether or not they are simply file servers, whether they are mail servers or database servers, being able to get all of the detail on those virtual instances. The concept of optimizers, this goes to some of the points I was making about efficiency, agility, being able to produce information about what's been discovered that can help shape or reshape some of the assumptions that you have been using to decide on what to purchase, and help refine, if you will, how your contracts going forward will actually be shaped. And again, one of the areas here is making sure that you don't have overlapping products that are supporting the same use case. You don't have instances where you have higher edition products that are really supporting lower use case needs. And then the workflow automation, being able to take advantage of the ability to use these tools to not only provide all of the hedging against what you would need to produce in the event of an audit, but from a governance and overall efficiency perspective, just making sure that moving forward, everything that you do is being done under a system watch with automation and workflow. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to pause here for a moment and allow the group to, and Brady will probably be the person who describes whether or not we will process questions that have been inputted into the question window, or whether we will take live questions. So at this point, Brady, I'm going to go ahead and let you.
Louis, this is Dan Bryan, and I got to apologize for technical difficulties that we had during the early stages of the call where I wasn't able to come on. But we do have a few a few questions in the question box now. So let me read those off, and then you can answer them. Does an EA help with not having to worry about when licenses were purchased?
NEA offers some advantages because depending on whether or not products that you will currently have enrolled, whatever products are enrolled in an EA, you have this opportunity to add incremental quantities of those products during any contract year and place an order for those incremental quantities at the agreement anniversary. It's called the Microsoft True-Up. So for products that are contained in the bill of materials, you do get the advantage of being able to run them, use them, and reconcile with them on an annual basis. If you're looking to add a product that wasn't on your EA, there's a different ordering protocol that needs to take place. If you're not in an EA, since the question was EA-centric, I'll just briefly touch on the fact that outside of an EA, if you're ordering products off of a Select Plus or the newer Microsoft Products and Services Agreement, you do have the option to install a product and then pay at the end of the month under which that product was installed.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came in was, how does this work? And I guess it's referring to the strategy of what we're talking about today with other entitlements such as SA, MSDN, training credits, etc.
The beauty of most of these systems, certainly the ones that are showing on the screen right now, is they all have an import facility to capture the data that is contained in what Microsoft calls the Microsoft License Statement, called the MLS. This is Microsoft's sort of version of the truth with respect to entitlements. Irrespective of what the customer might have, this MLS is always used as the benchmark for what Microsoft believes was properly acquired. And then being able to import that data, so irrespective of what the titles are, whether it's MSDN or any other product, it will be able to bring that in, establish that as your entitlement, and again, compare and contrast what you're entitled to, what is discovered. Now, when you think about the more robust software asset management solutions, you have what I call the license management module and the agreement management module, which is where you would be able to, create, if you will, what your software assurance entitlements are. Most people understand that software assurance gives them rights to run a current version of the product. That's not difficult to grasp or understand. But there are other benefits that accrue with some products. Some of them take the form of support incidents that come along with a particular SKU, some of them with training vouchers and other sort of end user benefits. All of that software assurance entitlement, can be managed inside of these systems. And Microsoft themselves are actually evolving some of their customer-facing systems for software assurance such that over time, there'll be a little bit better experience for customers trying to track their software assurance consumption, entitlements. But the challenge for most customers is that those refinements are being ushered in as part of the new business model for Microsoft, which has been called the Microsoft Product and Services Agreement, which is really a time zero moving forward. There's no historical forklifting of any of your previous purchase history into this environment where you would be able to benefit from Microsoft's updated interface. So in the meantime, customers who really want to be able to get better traction and better understanding of their software asset benefits, can leverage these systems here because that detail is imported and is presented in such a way that, end users can see whether or not they're leaving benefit on the table, which is a bad thing. You've paid for entitlements, you've paid for software assurance benefits. They do expire at the end of each contract year, so you don't want to be in a situation where, 3 years into the future, you've found that you've left a material amount of benefit on the table that you can't recover.
Okay, thank you. Another question. In addition to what you've already outlined, what are some of the warning signs that Microsoft is preparing to audit you?
You just need to execute every day with the expectation that Microsoft is going to audit you. You may be one of those folks where this already happened and you have your own war stories that go along with that experience. Maybe you took away some change ideas or some suggestions that you would implement to make the next audit maybe a little less stressful. But unfortunately, what we see is that many customers, once the heat is off and they feel like they've got a little bit of a window where they won't see Microsoft come back anytime soon, some of that follow-up isn't necessarily actually acted upon. But if you haven't been audited or you haven't been asked to participate in a SAM, you will be. So there's nothing that you can do to insulate yourself from the audit experience. All you can do is work to make it less stressful and less disruptive than it otherwise sometimes can be. Okay, thank you.
Another question, you may have just answered that with your last answer, but I'll ask you anyway. It says, I think I'm going to get a new account manager. What can you expect? What can I expect, and how should I prepare?
Well, there's a natural turn or churn, if you will, with account executives. So depends on the circumstances. Some executives, naturally, they'll spend 2, 3, maybe 4 years in an account relationship before they move on to a new role and they are replaced. In other instances, there's been a problem with the previous account rep, and now for customer satisfaction reasons, a new personality has been inserted. What all customers that are in the enterprise and to a large degree in the SMB space are facing, even though it's not explicitly discussed by their Microsoft rep to them, is all of you are expected to grow. Microsoft, when they do their annual budgeting and their annual quota assignments, there is no customer, none, that are given flat year-over-year growth. You don't know the details behind how much growth they may be looking for from you, but your new rep is probably going to have to demonstrate some serious changes, if you will, in terms of how much the trading relationship between you and Microsoft grows. Every year, beginning in July, the sales force is basically marching to the drumbeat of some new specific initiatives, whether they're online initiatives, Office 365 initiatives, Azure, SQL. I mean, it changes every year, and we keep our finger on the pulse of what those messages are that the Microsoft sellers are taking to your negotiation. So if you're getting a new rep, what you're going to be hearing is a fresh face going down the list of initiatives that Microsoft has tasked him or her with to get you to grow. So I wouldn't be surprised if everyone's talking about online. So if you're not an online customer today, that conversation is either underway or it's going to start up real soon. There are going to be substantial price increases that Microsoft will release to the market that will begin in the second half of this calendar year. So they should be talking to you about what some of those price increases are. But if they can't get the growth organically, or they can't get the growth with you willingly giving it to them, then what this whole conversation has been about becomes the next best option. And that is, if you're saturated or you're near saturated, if you're licensing a desktop professional, if you're in the programs that Microsoft has as their core programs and you're basically licensed your estate, Microsoft has to find very creative ways to extract additional sums of revenue from you. Again, either they can do that by selling you value-added new products and services, which sometimes they can, but more often than not, some of those value-added products and services don't have use cases that are mature enough in your organization to benefit from them. So, the compliance option is there, and so you may be in the queue for a audit at some point in the distant future, but if you're not necessarily, performing or meeting expectations, your position in the queue may be bumped up.
Okay, thank you. We got a couple more here. The next one is, what's the worst thing you can do when Microsoft launches an audit? There's so many bad practices, I don't even know where to begin on that one.
Well, certainly you don't want to begin the process of randomly removing software. That's just simply a knee-jerk reaction, and quite frankly, you may not even know where the software is. There should be more doing than there should be not doing. When you know that you have an audit that's on the horizon, it's probably the right time, if you don't have the expertise or the tools in-house, to have your version of the truth to match up to Microsoft's version of the truth is probably the best single thing that you can do, and a lot of customers will do that. Microsoft's going to come in and they're going to foot the bill for whatever the intervention is. They're going to go and they're going to pay somebody to do the network scan, to do the reconciliation, and to produce a enterprise license position. Now, they do work for Microsoft, and they are therefore motivated to make sure that Microsoft extracts what its business objectives are from that audit. Now, I'm not saying that they're working specifically, but their bias is to make Microsoft happy. That said, a lot of our customers will run a parallel exercise, one that they are financing and paying for, in which the third party is acting as their advocate versus simply a pair of hands doing Microsoft's work. So I would say that if you're in a situation where you really feel exposed, that you don't really know what's deployed, you don't have tools available to really ascertain what you have deployed, it's not a reason to panic, but it's just a reason to sort of think about protecting your interest and not necessarily defaulting to what Microsoft will produce as their version of the truth when you should have a corresponding report yourself.
Okay, thank you. One last question is, what is the best way we can get started on building a license strategy?
Well, we got to figure out which publisher you really want to apply those practices to. So, that actually takes me to a couple of additional points that I wanted to sort of kind of close on here. All right, so everything we've talked about really is with an eye towards you're going to have an audit. Okay, so I don't think anybody should leave this call thinking that there's anything they can do that will prevent the inevitable audit. All you can do is prepare for it. All right, and what we're talking about here is the solutions to help utilize the licenses that you have more efficiently. In fact, if you are either overbuying or underbuying, being able to take the licenses that you have and begin inventorying them with respect to either assigned or unassigned, to use that information to help get yourself a better structure to your contract, which is one of the two things that we really work hard to help customers attain. Certainly, we're always trying to help them get the best market price that's available for customers in their category. But sometimes the longer-term benefit to manifest when you've done things inside the contract that hedge risk for the future, that maybe give you a data point that you can take to the bank for something that'll happen 1, 2, 3 years into the future. And of course, that sometimes means taking and understanding what your software roadmap should be with relative to your strategy as far as the architecture. So for those products where you have these types of activities, is where you really want to spend some time thinking through that. And so this particular slide, and this is actually the last slide that I will present before turning this over to Brady, but we've talked about this in the context of Microsoft, and certainly everybody runs Microsoft, and most people run Microsoft under enterprise agreement, albeit many smaller customers will use Open or some of the older ad hoc transactional programs. But Oracle is notorious for audit. IBM, Cisco, VMware, these are all companies that have basically a footprint somewhere in most of your organizations where everything that we talked about relative to Microsoft has equal application to these publishers as well. And so these are the areas that we actually focus our practice on to help customers achieve the levels of software management that we've been talking about.
So, Louis, there's a couple more questions that came up, and you mentioned that Microsoft expects companies to keep growing in their purchases with Microsoft. So the question is, how do they expect companies that might be shrinking, like distressed oil companies, gas, E&P companies, how does that work where they're going to be shrinking with Microsoft?
Well, so that's a classic opportunity for them to sell into the hosted services model, where they will say, listen, your traditional perpetual license relationship for Microsoft committed you to a fixed quantity going into a 3-year term. There were very little provisions in the agreement to do anything but add to it. You could not reduce your commitment once you enrolled in an enterprise agreement. And so if Microsoft is being asked to find a way to help a customer who is going through contraction, then they're going to really try to shift you away from perpetual licenses into either subscription licenses or to hosted services, where they will make the point that, well, you have the opportunity every year to update whatever the number of participants are. Now, depending on how many participants you have enrolled in a particular program or offering, your price point obviously is tied to the number of entities. And so Microsoft may be able to extract more, oddly enough, they still may be able to extract revenue out of you by, yes, accepting a smaller number of enrolled entities or subscribers, but by increasing the price of the units that those entities will have to pay. So these are some of the toggles and the levers that Microsoft will try to exploit. Hey, there are going to be some instances where it will just be pushing rope, that circumstances are just so dire that they can't find any possible way to get year-over-year growth out of you. But believe me, they will work real hard up to the final moment before they can cede that ground.
Okay, thank you. We had another question come in, and it's, what is your opinion of having a LAR performance assessment?
LARs are part of the Microsoft channel. LARs are paid for and compensated by Microsoft. LARs really do need to curry favor with Microsoft because it's a big part of their revenue mix. Inside of every LAR, you will find personalities that are at least giving the appearance of trying to be objective and third party and not wed to Microsoft, and that is true from time to time, but Microsoft will use the LAR in many instances to actually execute the software asset management motion, and the LAR is incented to help Microsoft recover remediation revenue. So I would say that if it's not your best resource, if you think you have exposure, if you feel comfortable that your processes and your systems and your governance are pretty much in place and working for you, and that you don't think you're going to wind up exposing yourself to any downside, then there's no reason not to use the LAR. I mean, it's not going to cost you anything. But if you have any uncertainty, if you're not 100% confident that you've got your arms around everything that you really want to have them around, you're setting up the dynamic that I mentioned to you earlier, that you're not prepared for this, or you're worried that something's going to come out of this, and then you need to do basically a side-by-side assessment, one that Microsoft's paying for, and the provider of that service does have a motivation to make sure that Microsoft does net something out of the effort, and your provider trying to make sure that whatever is discovered is interpreted correctly, especially when it comes to understanding whether or not you have dev and test instances, whether you have been over-deployed with particular additions of a product that are a higher level addition that have no place supporting that use case. I mean, we've been very successful in changing the outcome of Microsoft's version of how the audit should close versus how it ultimately closed, because we do very good work on making sure that we completely isolate dev and test. We completely make sure that virtual instances that were entitled to be there based on a software assurance benefit are not counted as separate licenses. And where Microsoft, is making the claim that they've sold into a particular use case a higher edition of a particular product, and we've said there was never a use case to support that. Are you acting in the customer's best interest or not? And to get that basically turned off. So those are some of the areas where an independent provider of the service versus a LAR is going to work better for you.
Okay, thank you, Louis. That's the last question we have. Brady, do we want to open up the phone lines, or what do we do next?
Let's go ahead and close up. We'll give everyone a couple minutes back to their day. I do want to mention before we close up, we do have some additional information around software audits and licensing. You can find that on allbridge.com, or you can find that on our blog at allbridge.wordpress.com. You'll have additional insight on ITAM and software licensing, as well as audit response strategies, like we've heard today. We also have a couple of upcoming webinars here in the next coming months around regulatory compliance, robotic process automation, pricing trends. So keep an eye out for your email. We'll be sending those invites out to you guys. You can also go to sourcingleadership.com to see additional information. But I'd like to thank Louis and Dan for taking the time out of their day to present this to us today, and thank everyone for attending the webinar. We'll have, like we mentioned at the beginning of the call, we'll send out an email tomorrow with a link to the recording so that you guys can watch it again if you need to, or hit the highlights. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.